us. He's the subject matter expert that will give us the up-to-date information about estate planning, asset protection, and what the law says. It's an attorney. We have Attorney Soluto Uba. He is the founder and the managing attorney of the Uber Law Group. His firms help families create a clear, practical plan to protect their assets and loved ones. The law group approaches make it approachable and easy to understand so that people can move forward with confidence and peace of mind. So the session will be like a general information session, but it's practical, it's detailed enough. There'll be room for question and answer session after, but if we have like a personal or in need of a more detailed consult, that will be like a separate arrangement with the attorney. But after the presentation, there'll be room for question and answer. Yeah, we can ask for a friend. We can ask questions based on what we heard or what we know. But we have one or two things to gain from this information session. Let's bow our head for prayer before we call in the attorney. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for your presence. We thank you for this occasion. Father, we pray that you take control, that you, Lord, will help us and help us to learn and get wisdom concerning all those things we need to do. Take control of this session and bless us through this program. At the end of everything, let your name be glorified. Thank you for answering our prayer. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. So over to you. Welcome to Living Spring. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Yes. All right. Good afternoon. How are we doing today? Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you, sir, so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here this afternoon. Anytime I get the opportunity to speak about estate planning, especially to my people, it's always good, especially just the desire to have this conversation. I know for our community is something that's really important because when I'm talking to mommy and daddy at home, everything is no, we don't think about death, we don't think about these things. But it's important that we make a plan. Proverbs 13:22 says that a godly man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So that means the actions and decisions that we make today have an impact that we can't even see. So it'll be really, really important as we go over these things. And I just want to let everybody know, I might be an attorney, but it is my goal to make these things practical, interesting, and useful. So every time we do a presentation, I know people might have a preconceived notion about what it's going to sound like. Don't worry, you're going to get your time's worth. And my goal is that this actually makes sense and this be applicable for everyone. Brother Shala, I don't know if I'm using the clicker now, if it'll move. Okay, there we go. Okay, wonderful. So we have the presentation here on the screen. If at any point you have a question, if it's a burning question you want to ask, please, you can raise your hand, but just know that we will also have time for Q&A at the end. And then one last thing. By nature, I'm a warm-blooded person, so I might naturally just begin to sweat. I keep one of these on me. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm not nervous. It's just 1:30 in the afternoon, so this is what happens. So please, I'll be fine. But moving forward, for the next hour, I want to share with you something that no one has told you about estate planning. And so there's a few things that we like to do to make sure that everyone gets the most out of this time together. Now, here's the best way to learn. First thing I ask, I know this is hard in 2026, but I ask to everyone we can turn off our cell phone. Or at least put it on vibrate. I know we have kids, we have responsibilities, we have work, so we might need to get notifications or calls. That's 100% fine. But we want you to make sure that we're focused in, so we're getting the most out of our time. Additionally, we want to turn off social media, anything that might be a distraction during this time. And the reason why we do this is because you deserve this for yourself. If you're here, we've had service, we've had food, we've had fellowship, and it's still 1:45 and you're still here. So that means you're here on purpose, you have an intention and goal. So we want to make sure we maximize our time together. And then additionally, I never like to come anywhere empty-handed. I always want to be bearing gifts. So we do have an additional bonus for everyone here that we'll speak about at the end. I just want to add some additional love just because I'm very honored to have the opportunity to be here this afternoon with everyone. Okay, so this is my favorite part of these presentations. Every time I get to do one of these, I like to tell the audience that this is a trick question. It's a trick question, and then I'll explain the trick in about 5 minutes' time. But right now, I want you to raise your hand. Tell me, do you currently have an estate plan? Does anyone have an estate plan? Raise your hand. Okay. That's just about the percentage of people whenever I ask that question. We'll have one or two. We'll have a few people. Just know it's a trick, but I'll explain it in a little while. But here's the 3 biggest doubts that people have about estate planning. People feel that planning for death will somehow hasten its occurrence. In our community, we don't talk about death, and we don't talk about these types of things. And then also times people think, this process will take too long. They don't have the time. Work is busy. Kids have activities. Life is busy. And then lastly, people think that I'm not wealthy enough. I don't have this. I don't have that. I talk with younger people. They say I'm not old enough. I talk with older people. They say I'm too old. The reality of the situation is this. I've never had a client that passed away immediately after creating an estate plan. Amen. And you realize that, and you'll hear me say it many times, estate planning is not only for you. The goal of estate planning is to make sure that your loved ones are taken care of and protected. And then lastly, the benefits of estate planning are not tied to age, wealth, parental status, marital status, any of those things. If you're alive and breathing, you need an estate plan. Lastly, like I said, the big picture is that it's not just about you. It's about the people that you love the most. So when we're thinking of creating a plan, these are the factors we want to inform our thoughts. Now, here's what we're going to learn today during our time together. We're going to learn, if you have minor children, how to nominate guardians for minor children. We're going to talk about how to avoid probate court. I'll just put my cards on the table. You'll hear me talk about probate court a lot. I'm not a fan of probate court, and people will very, very soon see why that is. We'll talk about estate planning options. We'll talk about the difference between a will and a trust. And then we'll also talk about how to protect your children's inheritance in the future for when they're older, about to receive it. Now, here's what we're going to do in order to figure this out. In order to get your affairs in order, you have to know how to start your own estate plan. You have to know what's involved, and you have to know how much it costs. We're not going to focus on the cost. This part is more just educational, but we want you to understand the process, what the process is, so everyone is comfortable with it. When you're comfortable, when you're informed, you can make good decisions for you and your family and your loved ones. But I realize I have not properly introduced myself. My name is Saluto Uba. I'm the founder of the Uba Law Group. We're a law firm that's here to help people protect their business and family legacy. Additionally, I have the distinct honor of being a Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business member alumni. That's a program that is nationwide for business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are doing things. I have the distinct honor of being a part of the class here in Dallas. So we're very, very excellent organization. I recommend it for anyone. Additionally, our law firm was voted Best in BFW. We earned the silver medal for Best Estate Planning by Dallas Morning News. And then we're also rated Best in BFW by Living Magazine for the Mansfield and Arlington area as well. But all of that stuff is great accolades. All this is good information. But none of this means anything without the family. I remember a pastor said there's no success without a successor. So this is the reason that we do it. On the left here is my lovely wife, Dr. Lola Uba. She hates it when I introduce her as doctor, but she's not here, so she can't stop me. And then on the right-hand side, those are my kids, Micah and Sophia. Both of them, they just graduated. Micah is now in the 3rd grade. Sophia's she's a 1st grader now. Micah's 8. Sophia will be 6 in a few weeks' time in June. And so this is the reason why I do what I do. Our firm, we do business formation. We help people create businesses and companies for themselves. We do wills and trusts, of course, the topic of our time here today. We do trademarks, copyrights, helping people protect what they create, and then we also do maintenance and strategies, and of course, speaking engagements like this wonderful event today. Lastly, before we move forward, one of the things we like to do is we like to add value in every area. So even if I can't work directly with the client, we want to be able to produce something that is valuable to them. So we have a lot of videos on YouTube. So right now, this is over 430, and this screenshot is a little bit older. So I tell people, if you have a question about estate planning, you have a question about business law, trademarks, if you type in Uba Law Group, we probably have a video on it. So even if you can't work directly with our firm, we'd still like to be able to give back and provide value to people. And then the last thing I'll point out, it's hard to see here, but that number, this screenshot says 108. I believe we're currently at 145 5-star Google reviews. And I share that not to brag, but we take seriously what we do. The work that we do literally is impacting people's lives, people's families. So we're always honored when our clients, they go out of their way to share their experience. So this is something that we're very proud of as well. Now, I mentioned a few moments ago, I had a trick question. I asked everyone to raise your hand if you had an estate plan, and we only had a few hands raised. Here's the reality, though. Everybody here has an estate plan. It's just that for most people, the state of Texas has written it for you. So when everyone dies, there is an exact procedure that will happen for every single person. When you create your own estate plan, you opt out of the default plan by the state, and you get to choose what you want to happen instead of just going for the state rules. Because the reality is the state of Texas, they don't know you, they don't know your family, they don't know your situation, so they just create a blank canvas of rules for everyone. And many times it's not going to be appropriate for your situation. But that's what most people have opted into when they don't create a plan for themselves. I used to have an individual packet that has this breakdown, but I'll give you a kind of a quick version of what it looks like. This is the simplified version of everything that happens. We have situations for married with minors and dependents, married with no dependents, non-married with dependents, non-married with no dependents, and just these different graphs of how these things work. It's fairly complicated, even when you have it in front of you. But the reality is, the state decides what happens with your assets, who inherits from you. The state decides what happens to your children, and they don't know your situation. So if you have children, it can go to people it's not supposed to. If you have money and assets, home, property, it goes to people who you might not think it most prudent to go to. So when we talk about estate planning, we're talking about opting out of the default plan that the state has for you and creating a plan for yourself that's written by you based upon what's good for your life and your family. Now, here are our overall general goals when it comes to estate planning. So I won't go through each and every detail, but the big idea is when we're talking about estate planning, I'm talking about what we see in this top left corner, how to give what I have to whom I want, when I want, the way I want. How to give what I have to whom I want, when I want, the way I want. So there's all these other things that can be accomplished. We can talk about, avoiding probate court. This is very important. Maximizing your assets, minimizing taxes, fulfilling your charitable contributions. There are many people who you'll see, they'll have an endowment or a fund. Years after they've passed, they're still able to give on. They're still able to support because they established it the right way. All of these things are goals of estate planning. Now, we talked about the fact that everybody has a plan here. Even if you don't create something, the state of Texas has created a plan for you. And when I do a one-on-one consultation with the client, I tell them there's really one of three things that will happen, or one of three ways that people will pass away. They either have no documents in place, you have a will in place, or you have a trust in place. So when you have no documents in place, it's called dying intestate. It means you have no testamentary documents, nothing that says what you want to happen. So here's the downsides to dying intestate. Your assets are distributed according to state law. They can go to people who you don't want it to go to. You can't control what happens. And then additionally, if you have children who are minors, they receive everything as soon as they turn 18. So as soon as they turn 18, they're legal adults. They just receive everything. If you want to put any guardrails or boundaries, you want to wait till someone graduates college, is a certain age, has accomplished certain milestones, you can't do that if you don't have a plan. If you pass away intestate, the state just gives them everything. But on the contrary, if you have children who are under the age of 18, they cannot inherit anything at all because they're not legal adults. So now the state has to set up a system of holding their assets, conservatorship, other methods, and it's not free. They take their fee for holding onto the assets for you. So these are the things that will happen when we don't have a plan. A judge will decide who raises your minor children. They'll also decide who's in control of the kids' money, and you are guaranteed to have probate court. Now, the question that I'm asking, and this is when we're thinking about our families with minor children. If something were to happen to you, who would take care of your children? Now, thankfully, by the grace of God, most people have an answer to this. My brother, grandparents will take care of this. People, we have people who are trusted who can take care of, God forbid, something were to happen. But the question that many times people don't understand is whoever is going to be taking care of your family, your children, do they have the financial means and resources to do it? Even if you have money in your estate, people don't realize that this process takes a long time in many instances. So, of course, it's not to alarm, it's just to raise and to begin to think through how do we resolve these issues? How do we come up with a plan so we have peace of mind and we have confidence that these things are taken care of? Now, like we said before, if you don't have a plan, there's a default plan by the state, but you probably won't like it. A judge will ultimately decide who gets custody of your minor children. Now, here's the last thing we like to really just make sure it comes in clear. In many of these instances, when something happens, you have good intentioned family members who are trying to do the best for children, who are trying to do the best for the property, the family members. But in many instances, people will disagree and they'll have conflict. And that can draw out the entire process. That can make something that maybe might have taken 12 months, that can extend it into 3 years. It happens all the time. There are all these situations where you're trying to move forward, but people legitimately see things differently, and it will elongate the entire process in ways that become very expensive, very burdensome. So we want to make sure we create a plan. Now, here's the short answer. For people who have minor children, we nominate guardians for children in a will. You can lay out what happens in different situations. Is it one person? Is it a couple? What happens if there's situations of divorce, death? What happens if you need backups? You can nominate all of these things. And so when we talk about creating a plan, we want to make sure that we have that established so it's your wishes that will come into effect, not what a random judge who doesn't know you, doesn't know your family. You can't just rely on someone to be making the best decisions for your loved ones. Now, what about the money? So the money is where a lot of the emphasis of what we see in estate planning. So when we're talking about our estate, the legal definition of estate is just everything that you have. Bank accounts, vehicles, your home and real estate. If you're a business owner, we work with many business owners, LLCs, your business entities, retirement accounts, jewelry, artwork collections, fine collectibles. All of these things count towards your estate. And so one of the things that we talk about the most for our business owners is the fact that your business is part of your personal property. That's what's considered legally. So I have many business owner clients who profitable business, successful, doing well, and they don't realize that if something were to happen to them, their business is shut down because it has to go into the probate court. And it's frozen. They can't access, people can't operate the business, can't get into the accounts. Everything is shut down until the court process has completed. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a few moments. Now, here's the importance of title. People, my instructors always told me the magic rule is title. Who has title to the assets? That's going to be very important. And when we talk about the difference between a will and a trust shortly, that's going to come up a lot. So, there's two major options. We talked about what happens when someone doesn't have a plan at all. That's called dying intestate. All those negatives that you saw, that comes along with that. So when people are trying to develop a plan, there's two major options. You either have a will-based plan or you have a trust-based plan. But before we even get into that, let's talk about some reasons why some of these estate plans will fail. The first reason, the most important reason, poorly drafted documents. So what happens many times, they'll go to Google, trust or basic will, and they'll find something online and they don't realize that this is just a generic template that's not based upon the state that you're living in. It's just some generic language, and for them, it's better than nothing, so they'll go forward with that. The problem that happens is in many of these instances, the documents don't protect them from probate court. And I'm going to explain why you need protection in a few moments. They're not updated, and then they don't make any provisions for the children's inheritance. Now, here's a story that one of my mentors, he told me a long time ago, and when it comes to the idea of creating your plan is a living document. It has to grow with you. It has to evolve with you. What happens when you're a newly married couple in your 20s, your life situation is very different from when you're in 40s, 50s, 60s, so on and so forth. So your trust and your estate plan has to evolve. So my mentor, he told me the story of a man who was married 40 years, him and his wife, a long time together, and then he passed away. So he actually had an estate plan. And so his wife comes to the estate attorney. She brings all the documents. They have the big binder with all the documents. Goes to the attorney's office. The attorney's reviewing everything. And so he looks over everything. He's like, okay, this seems to be in order. This is proper. He's like, okay, Mary, come into my office. Let's discuss this. So he's walking. He's like, okay, Mary, everything looks proper. Everything looks okay. And so he's looking at the wife's face. He says, Mary, what's the problem? And she says, my name is Tiffany. So Mary was the man's first wife. They separated after 1 year. Tiffany is the wife he was married to for 40 years. He created his estate plan and never updated it. So all of his assets went to Mary. And I'll leave it up to your imagination if you believe that Mary shared the assets with the actual wife. But this is very common. People will create it one time and they'll just let it sit there. Your estate plan must always be updated because your life situation is changing. Even you'll have many people, they'll list the guardians, close friends when they were young, but then the guardians have now moved to a different part of the country. The guardians are now in New York, they're in California, you live in Texas. These people cannot serve as guardians for your children anymore, but you never updated it. Or you had someone who's going to be your trustee, your executor, but they're no longer here. They don't live in the country. They're not on the same part of the country as you are. These things have to always frequently be updated. Your estate plan, I tell my clients, it's not set it and forget it. You have to update it. Now, when we're talking about the two plans, we have option one, which is the last will and testament, and option two, which is a revocable living trust. I'll be very transparent. I think 95% of the families we serve are best served with the trust. But I want to lay it out so you people don't just think I'm biased against a will, but I want to explain why. All right, so last will and testament is better than nothing. Absolutely. If you have nothing at all and you upgrade to a will, excellent. Excellent upgrade. You have increased your capacity by great amounts. So with a will, you can nominate guardians for children if you have minor children, and you can nominate beneficiaries for assets that you own individually. It's a very important distinction. A will does not protect or does not cover assets that are owned by another party. So if you have 50-50 ownership, you have multiple shares. If you split ownership amongst an assets with other people, your will cannot control their portion. And then lastly, when you create a will, you nominate an executor to wrap up your affairs. In Texas, we call this a personal representative. They're the person who's going to come to the court, petition for probate of your estate, and begin the process with your will. Now, here's where a will fails. Wills have to go through probate court. Now, we might be beginning to pick up on the theme. I'm not a fan of probate court, and we're about to get into why. But wills have to go through court, and this is a big misconception. People think that, I set up a will so my family won't have to go through court when I die. Everything will be easy. That's incorrect. We talked about earlier that if you don't have anything in place, your family has to go through probate court. But even if you have a will, your family still has to go through probate court. Probate court is the legal way that you make the will effective. You have to probate the will. So people think many times that they're getting out of the complicated court process by having a will. That's not the case. So a will also doesn't protect you in the event of incapacity. Many times people are thinking, what if something happens, God forbid, if someone's not deceased, but they might be incapacitated, they might not be able to make decisions for themselves. A will can't do anything for you there. A will is also problematic if you cross state lines. So every state has their statutes that establish what are the laws for the probate process. So if you take a Texas will to New York, if you take it to Florida, California, they have different laws, so it won't work the same. And then lastly, like we said before, if you have children, they get their money at 18. A will cannot put any guardrails, can't put any boundaries. You can't say someone has to graduate college. They have to be 25, 35, 40. You can't do anything. When you have a will, they receive everything as long as they're a legal adult. And then lastly, wills provide direction and protection for a short period of time at death. It cannot help you during your life because the purpose of a will is for after you pass. And then it cannot do anything during the life of your spouse that you leave, or children or grandchildren. Now, like we said before, where there's a will, there's a probate. Okay, so you might be wondering to yourself, Saludo, you keep on down talking the will, down talking the probate court. What's the issue with this? What's the problem with probate court? I'm glad you asked. Now, this is the whole purpose of the probate court. Before, I don't want it to sound overly negative, because the probate court serves an important purpose. When somebody passes away, the way that they transfer their assets or distribute their assets to their heirs is through probate court. And so intentionally, the probate court is designed to be an open and transparent process. Because if you pass away and you have a long lost relative on the other side of the world or the country or wherever, they have a right to know that their relative has passed, because they might legally be entitled to inherit something. So the whole system is open. It has to be transparent. But for those same reasons, the probate process can be undesirable. So what generally happens is the court will appoint an executor if there's not one already established in the documents. This is called a personal representative. You publish notice in the papers to creditors, like we said. If someone has passed away, people who are supposed to inherit from them, they have to know. But likewise, if you have creditors, you have someone that you owe a debt to, that person is also entitled to know that you passed away, so they can try to collect whatever their debt is from your estate. So this is what happens there. You have an inventory and appraisal of your assets. They have to see what all did you own, what's there. We need to get an understanding and inventory of everything. And then over time, they distribute the assets according to their process. Everything has to go through the judge. You need the court permission to do everything. And number 7 is not technically true. You do not have to hire a lawyer. I strongly recommend it, because you will elongate the process so much if you try to do it yourself, because there's so many different things to it. So even our law firm, we don't do probate. We strictly do the creation of the wills and trusts, but we have a few trusted colleagues that we refer out probate to. And I'll explain why the difference is how those processes operate. But everything is reported to the judge. My friends who are in the military, they tell me that the process is almost similar to the military, because there's a lot of hurry up and wait. So you go for one hearing, you do one thing, you leave. Come back. You go for another hearing, you get permission for the next thing, you leave, you come back, and time is going this entire process. Now, here are the main downsides to probate. As you can tell, I'm not the biggest fan, but it's necessary for some situations, but there's some hassles that you probably want to avoid. So generally, it's expensive, it's time consuming, and it's public. So it's expensive. So there's no one fixed cost for probate. Every state is different. Even different counties, jurisdictions in Texas will be different. But when they do the polling, on average, they find that the number is between 1% to 7% of the total estate. That's what the cost is. Now, thankfully, you don't pay this up front. So it's not like they don't measure the estate. Oh, you have a $1 million estate, that'll be $50,000. They don't do that. But on the contrary, as they've just done the numbers, they've done the math to add up all the fees over time, that's what the value is. And usually they'll take the fees out of the value of the estate on the back end when everything is completed. But when I tell people 2% of $1 million is $20,000, people will come to my office, we'll do a consultation. Like, oh my gosh, what's everything going to cost? I tell them, if you think planning is expensive, you should see how much it costs to not plan. And the other aspect is, over the course of one's lifetime, people are accruing assets, they're working, they have retirement, they have a home. Some people are purchasing a rental house. They quickly think that, I don't have a lot of assets, I don't have a lot of money. And then we start to do the math. My favorite thing that I like to do is I have an Excel spreadsheet that we just go through. Okay, how much is the house worth? How much is this? How much is that? And quickly people think, I don't have a lot. The average number is 1.5 million to 2.2 million in total assets. And we're talking about everything, because that's how they calculate the estate. And then I show them, hey, 2.2 million, being conservative, 2% of that is over $40,000. That doesn't go to family, doesn't go to children, doesn't go to loved ones. It's going to the court. It's going to inventory and appraisal fees. It's going to attorney's fees. It's going to executor's fees. All these things. The cost is there, but it doesn't go to the right people. Now, as much as the expense is a negative downside, the worst part of probate, and so these are the different types of fees that are associated, kind of like I said. So it's even as much as the expense is the negative downside, to me, the worst part of the probate process is the time. So when you're going to the probate court, you're taking money and it's just burning. Now, here's how money burns the most. Probate is time consuming. So everything that we described takes time. There's the hurry up and wait. You go, you have a hearing for a specific agenda, and then you have to come back. If the judge grants you authority, it's only specifically over one section. Then you come back again and do the other part. On average, probate process will take between 12 to 18 months. So if I have a client that told me they had a 14-month probate, I tell them you had a good run, because this is assuming everything is going smoothly and no one's is fighting. As long as everyone's cooperating, is good. If you have tensions among the family, people who disagree, they want to contest the probate, this 12 to 18 months can expand into 24 months, 36 months. Now, the worst part of this is that when you're in probate, your assets are frozen. So if someone has a home, you cannot sell the home. You can't transfer the home to the children. If someone has a business, if someone has bank accounts, those accounts are frozen. They have to be processed because, remember, probate is the only legal way to distribute the assets to the next person. When you have assets, they're frozen. I tell my business owners especially, if you have a business, that is your personal property. It has to go through the probate process. So even if you have a successful business, if something happened to you, maybe you want to sell it quickly and claim the money for your family, they can't do that because everything is frozen in the probate court. So this is probably the worst part of probate. They're all frozen until the judge releases it. And so if it takes 6, 12, 18 months, it can become problematic. So when we talk about our families with young children, I ask, hey, do you have someone that will watch your kids? Many of them, yes, no problem. Do they have the finances to support your children for 12 to 18 months until your money is released? That's the question that people don't really think to ask, because many people are unfamiliar with the process until they've gone through it or they have a loved one that's gone through it. So lastly, the third downside to probate is that probate is public. So like we said before, the nature of it has to be transparent. People have to know, hey, this person has passed away, in case you have a creditor you're trying to collect or you're a family member who's trying to receive the assets. So because of that, anybody can see. I tell my clients all the time, you can go to any court, Dallas County, Tarrant County, Collin County. You can look up people who filed their will on Friday. All of that information is public because it has to be. You can look it up very easily. Now, many people, they value their privacy. Some people, they don't mind if anyone can see it. But many people, most of the folks that we talk to, they don't want their family business being out there because anybody can see how much money each child is going to inherit, who's receiving the property, who's receiving this, that. It's an open book. So these are also things, considerations, especially when you have young children who will be inheriting, because people can see what they're receiving, and it leaves them in a very vulnerable position. Now, it sounds like everything I'm saying is just talking negative about the will and the probate court, and it has a lot of downsides. But there are situations where we will see people do a will and go through probate, and typically there's two main areas where a will would be appropriate. The first one is if you have a very small estate. So when we say a minimal estate, we're talking maybe less than 6 figures of total assets of everything. In that case, the probate court would be extremely appropriate. It's not going to take as long. Texas is, as challenging as it can be, Texas has a process called an independent administration. They're trying to make it faster, even though many courts are backed up and even how long it takes you to do the initial process. But they have different methods that they'll try to use. And if you have a small estate, then it can actually be very appropriate to use a will and go through the probate court. Or alternatively, and we see this very seldom, but sometimes you'll have a client who they don't care about probate. The only thing that they want to do is name guardians for their children. If that's the only, and you'll go back and forth and make sure, is this the only thing you're concerned about? If that's the only thing they want to do, probate court is very appropriate for them. But the reality of the situation is, like I said, 95% of the families that we talk to, they have more considerations than this. And the things that they want to do is they want it to be easy. They don't want their family to have to go through back and forth in court. They don't want to lose money to the government because, and that's kind of the unseen part. The court system may have a vested interest because when you're in probate court, they're getting paid. If you have inheritance and they have to hold on to it for the kids because they're minors, guess what? They charge a fee for that as well. So if you don't do these processes, the court is not going to push you to do what's in the best interest of your family. Now, if a will is not the most appropriate plan, if it's not the answer, then what is the answer? What's the common solution that would help you accomplish your goals? That would be what I believe is a better option, which is a revocable living trust. So when I talk about trust, I like to call it a will on steroids. So everyone's familiar with the will. You see the will in movie and TVs and all that stuff. But a will is actually limited in what it can do. So I tell people where a will is limited, a trust actually is very, very flexible, specifically a revocable living trust. Now, there's many different types of trusts. There's revocable trust, there's irrevocable trust, there's limited lifetime protections trust, there's lifetime insurance, all these different types of trusts. Primarily, if you're talking about estate planning, if you're talking about creating a game plan for yourself, you're talking about a revocable living trust. This is what will be used in 99% of cases. Those other ones will have their very small, niche, and nuanced use cases, but we're talking about a revocable trust when we're talking about estate planning most of the time. So like I said, it's like a will on steroids. There's so much flexibility that you have with it. You can name beneficiaries for your assets. You essentially will lay out everything that I have and specifically designate who's going to receive it. And then with the revocable living trust, one of the most important parts of that word is revocable. So when you create a revocable living trust, you always maintain full control. You can put your assets into the trust. You can take your assets out of the trust if you want. You can change who your beneficiaries are going to be and who's going to inherit from you. If you really want to, you can terminate the trust and cancel it. While you're alive, you always have control of your assets. And then after you pass away, your trust locks into place with the decisions that you've made. So when you create a trust, after you pass away, nobody can change who's going to be inheriting from you. Once you create a trust and you pass away, your trust goes from revocable to irrevocable. So you can never have to worry that someone's going to be changing what your wishes are. Now, this second part is extremely important because it's very counterintuitive, but it's actually not enough to just create the trust. So when I tell people that, sometimes it can be confusing. It's not enough to just create the trust. When you create a trust, you have to do something that's called trust funding. So that means that when you create the trust, how your assets are titled will matter a lot. Right now, for people who don't have a trust, all of your assets are most likely in your personal name. When you create the trust, I tell my clients all the time, it's not enough for us to just draft the documents, you sign it. You have to transfer the assets that you have out of your personal name and put them into the trust. So your home goes out of your personal name and into the trust. Your bank accounts go out of your personal name and into the trust. Same for your life insurance, business, retirement accounts, beneficiaries. All these assets go into the trust. And the reason why it's so important is this last bullet point here. Everything that's in the trust bypasses the probate court when you pass away. So I'll be talking to clients and say, hey, Saludo, I saw something on YouTube. I saw something on TikTok. Is it strategic if I have some assets in the trust and some assets outside of the trust? What do you say about that? And so I tell people there's two things that happens when someone passes away. Either their family has to go through the probate court or their family doesn't have to go through the probate court. If you have a trust, your family doesn't have to go through the probate court. If you don't have a trust, your family has to go through the probate court. It's really that simple. Now, there are a few caveats. There are accounts that will have a beneficiary, such as bank accounts can have a beneficiary, life insurance can have beneficiary, retirement accounts. Those assets actually, they don't go through probate. If you have a beneficiary, they'll go directly to the beneficiary designated. But we still recommend that you create a trust and then you make your trust the beneficiary. And the reason for this is, for example, if someone has $1 million life insurance policy, and they state that their child is going to receive it. If something happens to that child before they can get the money, or even if they receive that money and something happens, they'll still end up in the probate court because that's what happens when you don't have a trust. So even if you want to make sure that a child receives the money, you create a trust, you make the trust the beneficiary, and then in your trust, you dictate what will happen to it. The reason why this is more beneficial is because you can guarantee that you don't have to go through the probate court. Your trust, I tell my clients that when you're talking about your trust, you have to consider it like the vault. It's the vault that can hold all your assets. And the best thing about a trust is that it's a vault that has an attendant. Your trust will always have someone there whose job is to make sure that they're fulfilling your wishes. So instead of just having it go into the probate or having it go out into the wild where no one can know what's going on, you put in your trust and there'll always be someone that's there to take care of the trust. Now, for many people, this is brand new information and it's reframing the way that we're kind of thinking about how you see money and how it operates and even how your assets can go. Because one of the things that's most complicated for people to really understand is that when you have the trust, you pretty much operate your life like regular. You use your same bank card. If your bank, maybe they'll send you a new card under the name of the trust, or your life will continue to operate in the same way. But you know that if something were to happen, now it doesn't go through the estate court. Now it doesn't go through the probate court, and your estate plan will take over it. Now, here's another one that we always deal with. Oh, it's a trust. Isn't that only for rich people? Trust fund kid, trust fund baby, all that stuff. The reality of the situation is that a trust is for anybody who wants to make sure that their assets are handled in the way that they want it to be. Now, another question that we hear is, what is a trust? Is it like a business entity? Is it like an LLC? And the reality is a trust is just a contractual agreement that lays out how everything that's in the trust will be handled. So if you have assets in the trust and your instructions are everything is split evenly between my children, if the asset is in the trust, it will be split evenly between your children. Whereas if it's not in the trust, it has to go through the probate court, and it's based upon the intestacy laws and all these different types of things. Now, here's a quick example of how these things operate. Michael has $400,000 in a bank account. He wants to leave it to his son Dwight when he dies. But he wants to make sure that Dwight is at least 35 years old and has graduated college. Michael cannot do this with a will. If he had a will, as soon as he passes away, everything just goes to his son. The only way that he can do this and he can make sure that those requirements are fulfilled is with the trust. Because the trust, like we said, it's the vault, and it has the assets inside of it, and the vault attendant makes sure that none of the assets go out until the requirements have been met. That's how you can be sure that your wishes are still being fulfilled even when you're not here. Now, really quickly, we have probably about 5 or so more minutes. We're going to land the plane. In every trust, there'll be about 3 roles. There'll be a grantor, a trustee, and a beneficiary. The grantor is the person who puts the assets in the trust. The trustee is the person who manages all the trust assets. And the beneficiary is the person who's entitled to receive the trust assets. So if you recall a few moments ago, we said that when you create a trust, you have control over everything. And that's true. That's because you're the grantor, you're the beneficiary, and you're the trustee. So this is our example couple. This is Harry and Wendy, who represent our husband and wife. So they create their trust, and they occupy all those positions. They can do whatever they want with their money. Even though, let's say they create their trust and say when they die, their money will be divided evenly amongst their children. That may be true, but while they're alive, they can do whatever they want. For example, if they make an investment, say they make a big investment and the investment goes bad and they lose all their money. Well, the children just don't get any money because there's nothing left. Of course, we don't want that to happen, but that's just to illustrate the fact that even after you set up a trust and even after you lay out what the inheritance is, just because you say that the children they divide it evenly, it's still your money while you're alive. So if anything happens to it, you're never restricted from doing whatever you need to do. By the grace of God, we use wisdom and we make smart decisions and investments so that the children have a greater multiplied inheritance. But it's just to illustrate the point. You're never restricted from using your assets when you create the trust. Now, the last part I want to emphasize is title. I say it's the magic key to how you do anything with trust. Your trust has to have title to your assets. And as you saw before, I have 2 small children. We had an elementary school graduation a few days ago. So this is one of my favorite illustrations for how the trust operates. So a revocable living trust is like a kid's backpack. It avoids probate court for everything inside the backpack. So right now, if you don't have a trust, your backpack is empty. What we want to see is we want your backpack to be full. We want your home to be in the trust, bank account in the trust, life insurance in the trust, all these assets. So the process of transferring your assets out of your personal name and into the trust is called trust funding. So remember, it's not enough to just create a trust. You have to fund your trust. You have to put the assets into the trust so that when you pass away, those assets that are in the trust don't have to go through probate. That's the big idea. And for example, it's as simple as someone who has a brokerage account under the name of John Doe. When he creates his trust, he now transfers it into John Doe Living Trust. Still does whatever he wants, still invests the same, still operates the same way, but now it's under John Doe Living Trust. Now, as a strategic side point, I will always recommend that you don't call your trust first name, last name Living Trust. Because on top of that, we want to incorporate privacy strategies. Even if you call it, Brick Wall Trust. If you know that Brick Wall Trust is your own, they don't need to know Brick Wall Trust belongs to Saluto Uba. I know who it is, and my family members, the appropriate people know who it is, but the outside world doesn't need to know. That's another benefit with the trust. You can own your property under the name of the trust and have privacy. You can do investments. You can operate under the name of the trust, and the outside world won't know. But the people who are designated and who are supposed to know, they have that information. Yes, so in summary, when trust compared to the will, you don't lose that large percentage of your assets in probate court. When you pass, your assets can go to your family in weeks and not years. And then it's totally private during life and at death. Now, I'm going to jump forward for a few slides and make sure that we can get to a few things that are important. Last thing I want to touch on quickly is taxes. So I'm not an accountant. I leave that to my distinguished CPA and EA brethren and sisters to make sure that they're specializing in their area. But when it comes to taxes, in Texas, there's no estate tax. So the state of Texas does not tax anyone when they pass away. So now the only tax that someone has to think about is the federal tax. And pretty much the short story is if you're a husband and wife and you make less than $30 million, you're not paying any taxes on your estate. If you're over $30 million, then there's a 40% tax. But when people approach that, there's very specialized consulting and strategies that they use to decrease their taxable income and make sure that the government doesn't take what they've worked hard. Now, I told you the whole purpose of our time this afternoon is to provide knowledge, but the reality is knowledge is not enough. There's a lot of families that we see, the people that we work with, that we serve, and they know what's going to happen. Over my years doing this, I realized that this is actually it's not a knowledge problem. People can very easily understand. It's an internal motivation problem. And so every time I do a presentation, it's never meant to, this is a fear tactic and you don't want people to be scared. You want people to move out of wisdom and out of prudence and out of proper stewardship. But we do tell people, in my line of work, you see it happen all the time. We had a client who they came to us for their estate plan, but they didn't fund their trust. And we kept on reaching out, setting up meetings. Hey, let's set up a meeting. Let's get this started. And in 2025, it was last year, 2025, I got an email saying that the father passed away on Father's Day. He was watching a movie with his kids, and he passed away literally there. And it's ironic because you think about this, and they started the process, but they didn't complete it the full way. So when I think of Proverbs 13:22, a godly man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. The decisions that we make now, they have ramifications into the future. So when we're talking about the plan, realize that the information is not enough. You need to make an action plan. The action plan is going to tell you what you need to do. How do you make it happen? When should you get started? And what's the investment to get it done right? So we tell people there's times to look for deals. There's times to be frugal. There's times to do what you can. There's certain important situations in life that you want to make sure you do it properly. And by the grace of God, we've been fortunate. The Lord has blessed our business. So I have the spirit of abundance. I know everyone is not going to be my client, but I urge everyone, go to whomever you're comfortable with. Make sure you get this done properly. Make sure you have a professional doing it for you. Now, beware of DIY basic documents. Many times There'll be different websites and different things where you can enter information and they'll spit out a document for you. But whenever I see this, I tell my client, if your leg is hurting you and you go to the doctor, you want the doctor to tell you what the problem is and how to fix it. Imagine how you would feel if you go to the doctor's office because your leg is hurting and then the doctor is looking at you, waiting for you for instruction. You go to the professional because the professional has the expertise to instruct you. But many times when people go to online websites, you do realize that they're counting on you to put in the information. They're just going to spit out whatever you give to them. It's a difference from getting a custom created plan by an expert. So I always want to encourage, please, as much as you can, we want to make sure that we're investing in some of these things that are very important for us. Now, I tell people, when you work with an attorney, you're paying for the guidance and the counseling that they provide. You're not even just paying for the documents themselves. So we do business law. So I create LLCs and companies for clients at our law firm. And just to time myself, I time how long it would take me to file the paperwork. I can do it in 3 minutes and 5 seconds. But when people come to our office, they're not coming to me just to file paperwork. You need to figure out how are you going to be structured, how are you going to protect yourself, what's going to happen with the business. Likewise, for your family, which is much more important, there's so many different things to go through. We spent most of our time talking about a trust, but when we create a plan, we want to create a total estate plan for a family. We want to make sure we protect people when they pass away, but we also want to make sure we protect people during their life. So that means your trust, your will, your power of attorney. What happens if you're not deceased, but something has you incapacitated? Who has power of attorney? Who has medical power of attorney over you? Do you have an advance directive? If in case you're ever in a terminal condition, irreversible condition, what are your wishes? How do you make sure that those are respected? What are your final disposition instructions? HIPAA waiver? Who can speak to the hospital or doctors on your behalf? All of those types of things. That's what goes into planning. Now, really quickly, I want to talk about our process. One of the things that we've been very intentional and strategic is that we actually don't operate a physical office. We don't have a brick and mortar space. We actually have a virtual estate planning office. And the reason why we do that is because the number one obstacle to people creating a estate plan is time. Time in life. Life is busy. People have work, they have kids, you have a married couple, now you have 2 schedules to coordinate. It's very difficult for both people to be in the same space at the same time. And so what we created is a process that actually is designed to make this fit into your life. So it's actually a 4-step process. And when we have a consultation, even this presentation can be considered step number 1. So we share the information. What's the difference between a will and trust? What makes the most sense for you? And then when the client is ready, they move on to step number 2, and we do our design meeting. This is when we gather all the information that they need to create their documents. Who's going to be your trustee? Who's going to be inheriting from you? What happens if your heir passes away before you? Who's going to follow up behind them? Who's going to be your power of attorney? Who's the backups? Who's guardian for children? Who's the medical power of attorney? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be all these different situations? We go over that so we can have the proper legal documents. And we actually have a very good system. We typically do that in about 30 minutes. And the big idea is to make sure, that it's convenient for families to do it together. Lastly, we create our documents. When we're doing the legal documents drafting, it takes about 3 weeks. And then we also do something that's unique for families. When we have your documents ready, we actually create a document review video for you that goes through every single document. One of the other things that we see is most people don't encounter a large amount of legal documents. So when you see 150 pages, it can feel intimidating. So we create a review video for you so you don't have to feel rushed. You don't have to feel like you have to remember every single question. You can watch the video. It goes through every document. You can pause it. You can take notes. You can rewind. And then after you've completed everything, if you have additional questions, then we can always get on a call and go through line by line to make sure you understand everything. And then lastly, we have our signing ceremony. That's step 4. So we're a flat fee law firm. Different people operate differently, but we're always flat fee based. We want our clients to understand exactly what they're signing up for before they get started. So part of our flat fee involves providing a notary who will come to you at your home, your office, wherever it's convenient. And then we make sure that the process is as quick and efficient as possible so people can continue to move forward with their day and don't feel like they have to schedule their whole day around it. and take up a lot of time. So our main goal is to make sure it's convenient and it fits into people's lives. So I always remind people, you get what you pay for. So you have to know when to avoid bargains. You don't want to bargain for a parachute. You don't want to bargain for a fire extinguisher. Nobody gets bargain brain surgery. So similarly, estate planning is something that's worth investing in. Now, I said I don't go anywhere empty-handed, and this is a gift that I like to offer to everyone here. If you schedule up a consultation, of course, we're not meeting today, but if you sign up for a consultation, we're doing two things. First of all, we're going to waive our consultation fee for everyone who's here, and then we're also going to provide a $500 discount off of your service if you sign up for a consultation today. So you can use this QR code if you're interested. If you're not interested, please never feel any obligation. We also want to make sure that people are doing what works for them and they're developing a plan for their family that can fit into their life. But we always want to offer incentive because this is the type of important things that we don't take care of sometimes. So whenever I'm talking to someone, I want to provide incentive, but I also want to provide a time clock so they don't think that they can wait forever. So this is a $500 discount. It's available today if you make the consultation. But after consultation, if you have a different change of mind, there's no problem at all. We always want to make sure that you're informed and you know what's going to best serve you. So with that being said, I want to thank you so much for your time and your attention. I know it can be challenging, but I also want to open it up for any questions and answers or questions that you might have. Yes, that's correct. So we're licensed only for Texas. I have a network of other attorneys who are across the country. So typically, if I have someone who reaches out from, actually, I don't have North Dakota. I have most states. But if you have someone from Florida, someone from Virginia, New York, California, we have other attorneys that we refer people out to. But yes, our law firm only creates trust in the state of Texas.
Having listened to you, for those of us that have gone through retirement process and everything, or you go to doctor's office, they will always ask you, do you have a will? They never talk about trust. Why?
It's true. Because it's the government system. So the will is connected to probate and the probate court, like we talked about. So there's a few reasons. First of all, it's because it's connected with the probate court, but the second reason is the will is generally a more popular one that people have. So that's the one people are going to know about the most. But if they ask you, do you have a will, and you tell them you have a trust, they'll know that okay, these people they have their things, their affairs in order, because the trust will always cover everything that comes with the will. We didn't have time to get into it, but even any good estate attorney, when they're creating a trust for you, it'll actually include a document called a pour-over will. So the purpose of this is, we talked about what your trust, you establish it, and you have to transfer your assets into the trust. Where you add a pour-over will, it says that in case you die and you forgot to transfer something into your trust, that pour-over will automatically add it to your trust. So there's so many different layers. We want to make sure so that nothing slips through the cracks. So that's also included in it. But yes, the will is the more popular document. That's why they most often ask for it. Very good question. Yes, ma'am. Oh, very good question. Because so the question is, what's the difference between a living will and a will? So a living will is another way to say an advanced healthcare directive. So that's the document that you have that lays out things like, if you're in a terminal condition, do I want them to keep me alive with whatever treatment is available, or do I want them to stop treatment and just keep me comfortable? This is also where you'll include your DNR, do not resuscitate. You include your preferences for tube hydration, tube feeding, antibiotics, medication, all these different things. That's in a document called a living will. It's also known as an advanced directive. So those are the same thing. It's different from last will and testament. The last will and testament is what we were talking about previously with the differences between how your estate will be handled. Living will says what you want to happen in your body in those final moments. Yeah, a living will is medical. So that's a very good question. To add on to that, A living will handles those specific situations. Another related document is your medical power of attorney. So the medical power of attorney is the people you authorize to make decisions on your behalf. But if you have a living will and you specify something, even if somebody has a medical power of attorney, they can't override your living will. So those two things work hand in hand. The living will says what you want to happen in those final moments. Medical power of attorney is who you want to have authority in case you're incapacitated and can't make decisions yourself. Very good.
Yes.
Oh, yes, that's a part of the packages. For time's sake, I didn't want to get too deep into the weeds, but all of our packages, we have three primary options that can serve people in different areas. We have a basic option that's just the trust and the will. Then we have our premium package, which includes everything: the trust, the power of a will, power of attorney, medical power of attorney, all that stuff that we talked about includes it. And then we have a high-end option. This is for the people who just say, hey, no, Saluto, we just want you to take care of everything. You finish everything, and we don't want to have to lift a finger. And so we offer as many different options as possible. So, yes, that's absolutely included.
Yeah. The other question I have is, I remember when Eda Ifetaiwo was preaching, he talked about properties in Texas that are, built on oil, whatever. So what's the implication of that?
So there's a few different ways it's handled. So for those who don't know, the mineral rights are separate from the land rights. So oftentimes there are people who own the land, but they only own the actual land. They don't own the minerals underneath them. The real question is, if you own the mineral rights and say, you have oil on your property, you would include that deed separately and to make sure that it's specifically added. And so that as long as you have a trust, you have some sort of mechanism to transfer it, you're able to include those rights. So that's not really a question of whether you have a will or a trust. It's a question of, do you know if you have the mineral rights above or below your property? And so specifically confirming that. Once you confirm, oh yes, we have the mineral rights, then you can add that to your estate plan.
What happens if you don't have the mineral rights?
You can't add it. Typically, in many of these situations, it's typically corporate companies that will have, they just purchased a lot of it wholesale. Sometimes you'll see in parts of East Texas, more rural areas, you'll have families who have had the mineral rights for generations. But most people in metropolitan areas, they just own the property. They just own the home. They don't own the mineral rights. So that's, unfortunately, that's common nowadays.
You must have been aware of some of us here having property here and in Nigeria.
Back home. Mm-hmm.
How does one go about it when it comes to trust?
Yeah. No, it's a good question.
Recognize, property from both places?
Yeah, so the short answer is no. But the longer answer is there are actually a few different ways that we'll handle it. One of the things that we do is we actually have colleagues that work in Nigeria and take care of our properties back home and actually some additional countries in Africa. But the challenge is that U.S. It doesn't recognize the trust back home. So when it comes to that, we tell people just become more strategic and use very practical means. But we actually do have a law firm that we partner with that does operate in Nigeria. So that's how we'll connect them with. So many times they'll have us take care of on stateside in U.S. and then they will refer to them and they'll be able to take care of it in Nigeria. But we do recommend people just become very, very practical in how you want to secure the property and make sure that no one takes it from under you, and make sure that so either the family or someone trusted is securing it. But yes, unfortunately, U.S. doesn't recognize it. Yes, sir.
If an individual have a will, the way you are saying is also necessary to have a trust.
Yes, I would generally recommend that. And the reason for that is if you have a will, you still will have to go through the probate court. And so like we talked about at the beginning, the probate court takes 12 to 18 months if everything goes well. Your assets are frozen. They can't distribute the assets. They can't distribute the home. If you have money in bank account, you can't send the money to children, loved ones, family, spouse. All those assets are frozen when it's in the will. When you have a trust, just like we said, you create the trust, and while you're alive, you transfer your assets into the trust. So we have many clients, and we have a trust ourselves. You operate your bank account from your trust. And so after you pass away, your trust is still existing. You don't have to go to the probate court. So now in a matter of weeks, you have your trustee, who's the person who will take over when you pass away. All they do is they show death certificate to the bank. They show the trust. I'm the trustee of this trust. I'm going to take authority over it now. The process with the bank, maybe it takes 1 or 2 weeks. But now in a matter of weeks, everything is transferred over. Whereas if you're going through the court, good luck. You won't hear back from these people for at least a month or so. If you do it in a month, you've been very fortunate. You're very blessed, but it takes a long time. It's the court system. They have hundreds of thousands of people that have to go through it. So it's delayed. They're not known for their efficiency. But with the trust, very quickly it will transfer over, and now things can continue to move without interruption.
Who is the best person to be your trustee? Lawyer or
Yes. Very good question. So the best person to be your trustee is someone that I tell people there's really 3 C's when it comes to selecting a trustee. There's of course character. You need to make sure it's a person of character whose character you trust, obviously. Capacity, even if it's a good person, do they have the capacity to handle what's going on? Are they extremely busy? Do they have many obligations? Do they have the ability to do it? So capacity, can they take care of it? And then competence. Does this person have the requisite understanding to handle these things? Typically, what we see a lot is it'll be children, grown children who will be able to operate as a trustee. Parents will know their children. This is my responsible son. This is the one that's a little bit. So you can choose the correct people. Or there are some attorneys' offices that will serve as the trustees. They're also corporate trustees. Our firm doesn't serve as a trustee. And when we're talking through that situation, the other question that we want to tell the person is, if you hire someone who's not a family member to serve as a trustee, they're not doing it for free. So now you have the estate, the value of it. Over the years, you have a corporate trustee. That money is coming out of the value of the estate. That's the money that's going to be distributed most likely to children, but it starts to be decreased small. So it really is a matter of, what are you comfortable with? Some people are comfortable with, hey, I just want it to be some outside a corporate trustee, and that's perfectly fine. But you always want to enter into those conversations with all these considerations. But yeah, in many instances, children can serve, a sibling can serve, trusted somebody can serve. Yes, so those are just internal qualifications that we use, but we call it character, competence, and capacity. So all of these 3 work together, because even if you have someone with good character, if they don't have the competence to handle it, what are we going to do? Even if they have good character and they're competent, if they're in a very busy time in life, they don't have the capacity to handle it. And so all these different things, they have to work together. And so these are just guidelines that we'll use to kind of help people, because it's an important question. The trustee will represent you after you pass. So it has to be someone who's got their proper head on their shoulders to be able to handle the responsibilities. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes. So no, this is a very good question. When we establish a trust, we have 3. We want you to have a primary, and we have 2 backups. Because this is a regular occurrence that will happen. So you have your successor trustee, you'll have the backup, you'll have the second backup. Additionally, we create provisions. If you get to the last person in line, God forbid, we have the ability to expand and then add additional trustees after that, so that the trust is always maintained. There's always someone to take care of it.
If you already have a will
Mm-hmm.
and you want to transfer it to a trust.
Yeah. Typically, most attorneys, if you have a pre-existing will, but they're creating a trust plan for you, they'll revoke the pre-existing will, and then they'll put everything under the new trust plan. And the reason for that is the trust, all the documents work together. When we create a trust, we have our will referred to our existing trust. And so you have to make sure that the plan is solid on all fronts. And then even other documents, medical power of attorney, a durable statutory power of attorney, all these things will refer to each other. So it's better that it's one comprehensive plan built together. So we can still incorporate all of your instructions that you previously had in the will. We can still incorporate it, but we want to make sure that we don't have various different documents. One solid plan together that incorporates all of your wishes. Very good question. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. Can you use a company as a trustee so that we know companies will be in existence almost perpetuality. And if so, is there a fee like annually to maintain the trust?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. Now I will push back on because that's a common assumption. Oh, this company will be here. If you're going to name a corporate trustee, I would probably rely on some of like the old trusted names, Raymond James, all these Charles Schwab, these people that are legacy. There are some companies that, they'll spring up and, they're here and they could legitimately be here, but then they could also legitimately go out of business. So when it comes to something that serious and they know it, Raymond James especially, they're a big corporate trustee. Their fees, we haven't used them, so I don't have the specific numbers, but they bank on the fact that that they're going to be there. They've been doing this for a long time, so they're going to get their percentage and they're going to get their cut, their fee for doing it. And as long as you're able to fund it, that's perfectly fine. And sometimes, in fact, there are people who will take out a life insurance policy and proceeds of that policy are set up to pay the fee for the corporate trustee. So there's ways to do it. So it's not that one is better than the other. You just need to come into it with a strategy saying, okay, I want my trust to be taken care of. I don't want people to have to worry about it. I'm going to hire this trustee, and so I'm going to set up this account. I'm going to save or set aside this money just so in perpetuity that they're able to be paid for. So yes, so they will charge you, but if you do it just out of an abundance of caution, I only recommend those tried and true, tested names for those companies that will be there.
So in essence, trustees have to be paid?
No, trustees do not have to be paid. Typically, when family members are trustees, they won't be paid. If you have a corporate company service trustee, then they definitely are paid. Typically, if it's children will take care of it. And then even, I'll speak one more time, or I'll speak a little bit more to the trust. In many instances, the vast majority of instances, when you have a trust, the purpose of the trust is not to exist forever. In all purposes, for all intents and purposes, you want the trust to only exist as long as it has to do, and then it can shut down. So, for example, say you have 4 kids and you have $4 million of assets. Each kid receives $1 million. If you pass, ideally the trustee will come into place. They'll do the accounting of everything. If they can distribute all the assets and everything within 1 year, then they can wind down and they can close out the trust. And the reason why it'd be preferential to do that is that once you pass away, there are accounting requirements. There's a tax return that has to be done for the trust. There's all these different things that start to add up that all have expenses. So if you can very quickly and efficiently administer the trust, once all the assets have been distributed, then the trust can close itself because there's no more purpose for it to exist because everything has been distributed. So that is the kind of the ideal situation. But sometimes it does take longer. The people who have small children and in their trust, they say, that you get this much at age 25 and then everything will go at age 35. So God forbid if you pass and your kid is 15, the trust has to be in existence for another 20 years. It has to pay tax returns. It has to do financing and accounting and all these things. And so these are some of the expenses that you have to bake into the administration of running the trust. So those are some of the factors when the children are young. That's why it can be very helpful if there might be a family member or someone who won't charge you to do it. Because these things, you'd be surprised, all of this stuff, money, starts to add up over time. I'm sorry?
Are taxes required from trusts?
Oh, very good question. And please let me know if we're pushing on time. Are taxes required on trust? So that's a very good question. So when you create your own revocable living trust, the trust itself does not pay any taxes. For all intents and purposes, the IRS treats the trust like you. While you're alive, you don't have to file a tax return for the trust. While you're alive, the trust can be under your personal social security number. You don't have any additional tax burden while you're alive. After you pass, now your successor trustee comes into place. Because there are people who are going to inherit, it's essentially a fiduciary obligation. There has to be clean accounting of everything. They file a yearly reporting and yearly tax return for the trust. At any point, if a beneficiary requires an accounting, the trustee is responsible for doing that. So the reporting is required and the tax returns are required after you pass, but not while you're alive. Very good question. Thank you all so much.
Talking about assets, what about the other side, like debt and liability?
Oh.
Can you pass that to your trust or?
So in many instances, that's a very good question. So in many instances, there are types of debt that you can pass on to trust. So for example, we'll do it two ways. Typically, let's say if you had consumer debt, you had $20,000 in credit card debt. If the person passes, the consumer, the creditor that has the debt, they have the opportunity to seek out the person who's passed for the debt. In many instances, that means that they'd have to be combing through obituaries and different court records to find out that person has passed. And then additionally, when if the assets are already in the trust, you have the trustees who have a level of entitlement to the assets first. From a practical standpoint, there are some regular consumer unsecured debts that can essentially be washed away when someone passes. Now, there are other types of debts or taxes that will come into place. So, for example, if someone had their retirement assets in a trust, 401k, and then there's a taxes to be paid when all of that is withdrawn. How a trust is typically set up is that the trust itself will prorate all the fees. They'll take the hit and they'll pay the taxes. They'll pay the taxes first, and then they'll distribute to the children, to whoever the heirs are, after the taxes have already been paid. So in essence, there are taxes that get paid, but when it's set up properly, your heirs, when they receive it, there's no strings attached. The taxes have already been paid, and that's been taken care of. That will most likely decrease the total amount of what's in there, but either the trust will pay the taxes or you give it to the heirs, and then the heirs have to pay the taxes. So typically the trust will just go ahead and take care of that on the front end.
Yeah, maybe the main benefit of having a trust is to forestall litigation. But, I don't know whether there's a popular case is Michael Jackson. Mm-hmm. When he died, he's in debt. And the estate, the executor, they're able to make money, turn things around. But now, the daughter, I think, is still in court fighting the estate because the money now available is more than what was budgeted for when he's making that trust.
Yeah. And that's why we talk about the power and the value of updating. Now, there's a couple of things that factor in there. Michael Jackson's trust, his estate had a proper trustee that still is able to act on his behalf. There was a debt financial position when he passed. The trustee is working with with his music royalties. They're making business deals. How do we build up the assets of the trust again? Now the trust is in the positive, but then you start to look at when the trust was created, what was the distribution that was supposed to go to children? If the distribution was a smaller amount because he was closer to debt, now the daughter is saying, whoa, now there's abundance. Why am I still receiving this small amount? That's part of the part. Then that lawsuit it's separate from the fact the lawsuit is actually it's a response to the trustee doing a good job of being a good steward. So that's really kind of separate from the actual trust, but it shows that the main purpose of the trust, hey, let's avoid probate court. Let's make sure we can manage assets. You have a dead person who's now their estate is worth more than what they're. And that's an incredible thing to do, but it actually does show proper stewardship of the estate there. Now, what can happen in certain situations is really, and those are actually, there are good stories to see. Those are minority of stories just because, not everyone is Michael Jackson. But the reality of the situation is you want to be able to properly steward the assets. So in many situations, a trustee will manage if there's a retirement account. You don't have to pull it out and withdraw it. If there's still children who will benefit, in many instances, they'll make sure that the financial planner, whoever managing the money is growing while the children are ready. And then by the time they're set to inherit, you have assets that are much larger than when the person originally passed. So all these things are part of how it can happen. What I try to remind people is the primary. Oh, and you mentioned one more thing. I'll touch there. The primary purpose of the trust is to get you out of the probate court because you don't want to be stuck in probate court for 2-3 years and not have access to the assets. Now, a second benefit of what the trust can do is it can protect your children's inheritance. Here's one last thing I'll leave you with. When you have a trust, your trust does not give you legal protection. If I have a business or if I have a property, a rental property, and I put it in a trust, somebody can still sue me. Because it's a revocable living trust, the court understands that you have full control. Like we said, if you wanted, you could terminate the trust and get rid of it. So they're not going to let you get special privileges for something that you have full control over. However, when you pass away and your children are set to inherit, your children don't have control over the trust. They just have to follow whatever rules that you have. So your children's inheritance is protected. So if you give your children, you have 3 kids, and each of them, they inherit a rental property. If someone tries to sue your child for that property, the trust will protect them. They cannot get at the property because the trust is established and the property is inside the trust. But all of that is because when your children inherit it, they're not the people who created it, so they actually don't have the control over it. So these are some of the strategies that we can start to use, and that's when things can get really beneficial because you have that peace of mind. You're developing wealth, and you can pass it on to your children, and you can know that it will be secured and outsiders can't get to it. Very good question. I'm sorry, I believe we have one more. We can do one more, and then we'll finish.
I think you were talking about paying taxes when someone is dead.
Yes.
Can you explain that better?
Yes. Now, once again, I will always defer to my CPA colleagues, but there is a final accounting that happens when someone passes away. There's a 1031, I believe, that has to be paid, that has to be set up when the person has passed away. Now, if the estate is created, then the estate can pay whatever tax is available or whatever tax is due. But typically, that's going to be the purpose of having the trust accounts and all those things set up so that the estate pays for it. The bottom line is, we want to have a funded trust, and we don't want our heirs and the people who are inheriting to have to come out of pocket for anything. Typically, the trust will be set up where it can pay whatever those expenses are. Now, of course, you'll coordinate with the CPA, proper accountant, to make sure that that can be as decreased as much as possible. But that's how the trust is set up. The heirs inherit without obligation because the debt has already been paid beforehand through the trust.
So if a person is dead, the debt still has to be paid.
Yeah, so if a person is dead, what the court will do is they'll do a final, so the trustee's responsibility will be to do a final tax return. And if a person, say they had a thriving business, and if they're alive, they're going to have to pay $50,000 in taxes. Uncle Sam, he's still going to get his money. So when you do the obligation, the final tax return, that's when they kind of fish out all of the different liabilities that are left, and then that person's estate will take care of it. Or that person's estate could still posthumously have an obligation to the IRS.
So there's a posthumous tax return.
So, well, not necessarily. So the power of the trust can protect against everyone, typically, except the IRS. The IRS will get their money regardless. And so, and that's another thing. Trusts are very powerful. They can defend against a lot. You cannot defend against the IRS. They will always get theirs. Now, that's different, though, from an estate tax. An estate tax is taxing on total value of the person's assets. If you're under the $30 million threshold for a joint husband and wife, $15 million for an individual, then you won't actually have an estate tax. But there's different timings and different things that can factor into that. That's why I'll always refer to our accounting colleagues.
Is this what's that
For the final estate tax? So there, yes and no. So the yes part is that the actual accounting for the individual will be final. However, if there are additional assets, say someone had a 401k or they had investment accounts, when you start to withdraw from that, then there'll be additional taxes. But that's separate from that person's final accounting when they pass. But yes.
So what happens? What happens when you you have a student loan, and then you already have a trust fund, and you pass away, they take the student loan from that?
No. That's the short answer. So depending on who you ask, people have a very different relationship with student loan. But I tell people, look, if you're gone, you can't take from the estate in that instance. That is one of the few areas where student loan debt will be. Now, the exception to that is if you had a guarantor. If someone else is a guarantor on your student loan, even after you pass, they can still come after the guarantor. But if you are the only person who had the student loan, and now you have assets and you leave them to your children, they can't take the kids' assets to satisfy your student loan. Yeah, but if you have the guarantor, they will come after the guarantor. They'll try whoever they can. They'll try to get onto someone. Anyway, well, thank you so much. I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Hold on. Well, business.
Yes, I'll be right here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Yeah, we have this little token on behalf of Living Spring SDA Church. Pastor Shuntade, the headers, the congregation, we really appreciate you for coming.
Thank you.
God bless you, very good.
And I'll be right here if someone wants something.
o'clock. So thank you for waiting, God. We continue to help and bless us. No, we need wisdom. No, with this time and world we are living in, we need wisdom, we need information. And this is just like the beginning. This is just the beginning. So many aspects of life that we need to get more knowledgeable. This is like estate planning. The other thing we are working on is like student admission process, the scholarship fund, so that we can encourage our members and get the necessary information. So all this, God will help us to plan well and to live well. Oh?
I think what I want to add to what he said was, it's not just about the taxes. Part of the estate plan, also your wishes.
Yeah.
Right? If you're in the position of, I want to be taken to Nigeria, that's a good place to make sure there's documents. Absolutely. Right? Y'all know my father, and we didn't have anything for his wishes. So this is real time, real. It's not just about, oh, who do I owe, who gets what.